when it came to healing from complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I was raised by a massage therapist, so touch has been part of my life forever. There was a meta-analysis that was recently done that looks at 137 studies and about 13,000 people, and they show that touch literally lowers in a measurable way cortisol in the blood. Because one of the number one effects of PTSD or trauma is disassociation. Yoga's always been a healing space. It's a place for me to come home to myself. So whenever I inhaled, my airway would actually close. And when I exhaled, it would open, and it should do the opposite. So every time I breathed, I thought I was suffocating, and I was living in a state of panic 24/7, the most primal, like primate level. Being touched frequently lets you know that you're part of a tribe, that you're connected. Simply put, we're connected.
Today we're talking about something that gets overlooked in yoga all the time: touch. Not random touch, safe, consensual, skillful touch that actually helps the nervous system settle instead of overriding it. I'm sitting down with Kiara Armstrong, massage therapist, yoga teacher, and author of Hands-On Yoga Assists, to break down what really happens in the body when touch feels supportive rather than forcing or fixing. We get into a rubber band method, how teachers can read tissues without pushing past someone's edge, and why consent is truly the foundation of co-regulation. Kiara also shares her lived experience with complex PTSD, disassociation, hypertonicity, early menopause, and how understanding her nervous system changed the way she gives and receives touch. This conversation goes deep into fascia, HRV, sympathetic and parasympathetic tone, and why frequent, safe contact is a biological need, not a luxury. Let's dive in.
Kiara, I'm so excited to have you on my podcast today. Kiara has written this incredible book called Hands-On Yoga Assists. It's a teacher's guide to the rubber band method, and every teacher and every student should really pick it up. It's brilliant. For those new to this, who've never heard about this book, what is the rubber band method?
Yeah, so the rubber band method is a tool that I'm passing down to yoga teachers. And the tool is essentially a full system that covers biomechanics, anatomy, consent, trauma awareness, and trauma sensitivity for offering touch in the classroom. In my book, it focuses a lot on assists, which are essentially touch to enhance a pose. So it might heighten the stretch, it might heighten the sense of ease, or even the sense of grounding that's felt in the pose. The goal is never to advance the pose or make it deeper. It's just accentuating it and adding a little bit more. So that way we get that little bit of oxytocin, endorphin, feel good sensation of making contact and deepening into our practice. I go into adjustments as well, which is corrections. And the idea of corrections and adjustments is to use a much lighter pressure. Again, we're not forcing them into the pose. We're not looking for a completely different shape. Instead, we're using light tactile touch to help guide the student towards where safe alignment might be, or maybe to clarify if they're a little confused about how they're holding their body. Both have the intention of helping to increase proprioception or body awareness. And then also part of that is just sinking into embodiment. So proprioception from a scientific standpoint is body awareness. And in trauma awareness or in the yoga spaces, we think of it as embodiment. And so it really helps that for the student.
I love all of it. What inspired the creation of the rubber band method?
That is a lifetime in the making. It really is. And I go into it a little bit in the book, but I was raised by a massage therapist. So touch has been part of my life forever. I think that touch serves a purpose, and particularly in the yoga space. But because it's always been clinical in my household, it's always has served a purpose for pain relief, ease, reduction of stress, etc. It's always been something that I've been open to. And then I started my yoga journey about 25 years ago. And I started to experience touch in the yoga world, touch that was sometimes not great. And I would say even injurious. Like I've experienced some injuries from touch in yoga classes. And then I've also experienced touch that's like mind blowing, miraculous, life changing, and particularly for me, life changing when it came to healing from complex post traumatic stress disorder. And so, this multifaceted experience of the pros and cons, doing it well, doing it not so well, and its overall power touch that is for the experiencer made me realize I want to include this in my yoga classes. And so from the very beginning, I've been practicing yoga for about 10 years before I became a yoga teacher. That was about 15 years ago when I started teaching. From the very beginning, I started offering touch. And so I've been doing it all along. And over that time, I have really hurt myself. Like I have hurt my back trying to give assists. I have learned what a forceful adjustment or correction looks like and how that does not serve the student. And also what light touch as an adjustment looks and how they start to figure out, oh, that's where my knee needs to be in Warrior Two or whatever the posture is. Like they're figuring it out in their body. I'm not doing it for them. And it's been 15 years of teaching, making the rubber band method, making every mistake known to man. And finally, around COVID, I had a friend say, like, why aren't you bringing this out into the world? No one is doing this. You need to make this broader. You need to bring this to other teachers. And I thought, okay, I'll write some books. And then the publisher picked it up. And then it's just gone from there. I've done my best to build a whole system that really looks at how important consent is, that looks at why we need to be trauma sensitive when it comes to touching our students and the very real statistics behind that. But then what safety actually is once you've gotten clear consent. What is that for the student? What is that for yourself, the teacher? Because a lot of times we sacrifice ourselves in order to give our students this miraculous experience in class, whether it's the touch or the class or whatever it might be. We do sometimes sacrifice ourselves. And so RBM, as I call it, rubber band method, is meant to be this whole system for safety and for ooey gooey juicy assists in your yoga class that just feel amazing.
Love how it started from a childhood experience, your mother just bringing it into you and you practicing it throughout the years. Also, thank you for saying lots of trial and error, even as a massage
Yes.
therapist, how when you
Yeah.
bring it into a yoga setting, it can definitely change how touch is felt, how touch is sensed. It's so interesting to hear the arc of what brought you
Yeah.
to create this method. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd love to dive into the nervous system. What is happening on a nervous system level when we receive a skillful assist, when a teacher actually knows how to touch a student in class?
Yeah. And I want to qualify that too, because there can be skillful touch, but it doesn't matter if it's skillful if it's not consensual. So
Mm.
I'd like to qualify it by saying consensual, skillful touch. When that happens, co-regulation happens. So we are a species, and science backs this from children to adults. It's proven through and through that we need contact. A lot of first world nations, a lot of industrialized nations, we're so independent. We don't think we need contact. Our
I think
biology 100% needs it. Research shows that we need to have it frequently. We need to be touched all the time. And so there is this middle ground where it's not necessarily clinical in the sense of it being a massage therapist or a doctor, and it's certainly not intimate, right? It's somewhere in that middle ground where it feels really good. It releases oxytocin. It helps to release all the feel good neurochemicals that basically tell our body that we're safe. And so I say co-regulation because when someone touches us and it feels good and it feels consensual, that's really the big thing. It being consensual tells our body we're safe because we're agreeing to this contact, right? And so then it can feel good. And when it feels good, co-regulation happens in the sense that all of a sudden it's a body up type of regulation. The body is saying, hey, mind, we feel really good. This is awesome. I feel so grounded. Ooh, who knew I was so tight in my hamstrings or whatever it might be. Like we get this embodied experience of truly being in our body, it feeling good. And that truly, it's as simple as that. That is embodiment. That is building proprioception and body awareness. And that feel good releases the oxytocin. It does reduce stress. There was a meta-analysis that I cite in my book that was recently done that looks at 137 studies and about 13,000 people. And they show that touch literally lowers in a measurable way cortisol in the blood. And so it's in real time reducing stress when you have skillful touch and it feels good and it's consensual. It also reduces anxiety, reduces depression, reduces future instances of these. And it's even more true and the effects are even more impactful for people who have had mental health conditions. So like I said, I had complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So people like me, we feel those effects even more. So that's in a nutshell what happens when you have consensual, skillful touch. The body regulates itself, it goes into a relaxed state. And in the simplest terms, that just feels good.
So go out and ask if you can touch someone.
Yes. Yeah, and I wanna touch on that because this is something I talk about a lot in my book and dedicate some time to. How you ask is really important. It shouldn't be in front of everyone. It shouldn't be the moment as you're reaching out your hand to touch someone like, "Oh, can I touch you?" What I like to do is assist coins are awesome. The coins or the cards or whatever, flip one side up to consent and you have it on your mat, or the other side to decline, and that you can switch it anytime throughout class, right? Those are awesome. The other way, and how I've done it, because not all studios provide coins, is before I do anything in class, right? I have everyone come into child's pose or whatever your centering posture is, and their eyes are dim or they're prone, so they're face down. They're essentially not looking at everyone in the room. Let them know what's going on. We want clear consent. So I'll say, hey guys, I'm a hands on instructor. Sometimes I offer light touch to correct a pose. And then sometimes I offer a slightly firmer touch to enhance a pose to add a little bit more stretch, grounding, or ease. All of this is optional. If you prefer not to be touched, give me two thumbs up. Let's say they're in child's pose or something. No one in the room knows what anyone else is answering, right? So there's no pressure to say yes. We might think, why would someone feel pressured? It's a real thing. Everyone's looking at you and you're like, I don't want to be the odd one out telling her no, him or her no. And so do it in a way that's discreet. And that's really tactful because also after that, I say thank you. So they know I've seen the signal. I'll throw in, if at any point you change your mind, feel free to let me know. Like you can shake your head no, or just give me a little hand up, stop, nonverbal cue.
I think that's so important. Thank you for bringing that to awareness to the public and to have it in your book. Speaking of your book, one of my favorite examples in your book is how you explain the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system as the two sides of the heart. Could you walk our listeners through that?
Yeah. And when it comes to the nervous system, let me step back because this is a whole story that can come together. So, heart rate variability is the difference between the beats of your heart, right? And so, you do not want, but from beat to beat, that time in between the beats to be consistent. You do not want it to be the same. You don't want it to be close to being the same. You want there to be variability, hence heart rate variability. And what's happening with the heart is that your sympathetic is firing it, quickening it. Your parasympathetic is firing towards the heart, slowing it. When we inhale, the heart quickens, that's sympathetic. When we exhale, the heart slows, that's parasympathetic. So again, that firing that's happening between the two creates this variability. Greater variability means that both branches are firing, they're both doing their job to quicken and slow the heart. And in doing so, it increases heart rate variability, which is a marker of essentially autonomic nervous system health or regulation. And so the analogy that I use in the book is that these two branches act a lot like driving the car. So when you drive a car, you use the gas to accelerate. That's your sympathetic nervous system. The gas pedal will get you to the store, right? But you truly cannot get to the store safe without using the brake. You have to use the brake. And so it's really a back and forth. You hit the gas when you come to the stop sign, you hit the brake and you're letting off the gas. That's really how the heart works. It is not an either or. I think that in the yoga world, there can sometimes be a little bit of misconception that you're just running on sympathetic or that you're just running on parasympathetic. It is absolutely not true. You are always at both times, both branches are firing, and you want them to essentially be equally strong or equally toned, if you will. So you can think of their tone just like muscle tone. The bicep, right? The upper arm muscle, the bicep, when we tone it, it gets stronger, it gets more capable. That's the same with your nervous system. So when we do parasympathetic toning, we're essentially strengthening that parasympathetic. So what that looks like, going back to the analogy of the car, I'm driving to the grocery store, I use the gas. If I am trying to hit the brake, but the brake isn't working, I'm going to fly right through that stop sign, right? I need my brake to work. And so if we strengthen the parasympathetic nervous system, we tone it, that brake works when we press on it, if you will. Again, a simplified analogy. But that's really what HRV is. It measures essentially the strength of the two, the ability for both of them to act on the heart, and in thus both of them firing and stopping, if you will, creates this variability.
I love that. Thank you so much for also saying that We don't want to be in one or the other. We want to have both tones so that when we need to be alert, we're alert. When we need to relax, we're going to relax. But if we only strengthen one, then we're living out of balance regardless. How can you tell if someone in class is leaning towards more of a sympathetic tone just by seeing maybe if they're bracing, if there's a little bit more rigidity, is there a limited breath? Like, how can you recognize if someone is living in a more stressful state?
That's a hard question to answer because we as people have become so good at wearing masks, especially women. We could be stressed out of our minds and we're just like, I'm fine. But the body, when it's in too much sympathetic arousal too consistently, and we're in this chronic stress phase, all manner of chaos erupts in the body because you're getting a lot of inflammation. The brain is starting to truncate its neurochemical production towards stress production. And every system in the body essentially starts to break down eventually because your body and your brain, from a very primal standpoint, only cares about your survival. It doesn't care about reproduction as a survival mechanism, right? If you were to survive, you're not necessarily going to create a kid because survival might mean I need to feed myself. So why create more mouths to feed? And look at it in multiple ways, right? So if you're looking to survive, like from a primal standpoint, thinking of the body not as the higher executive functioning, but really the more primal parts of the body, you're not going to be eating food. You're going to be running for your life. And you're not, so that means you're not going to be digesting. You're going to be firing multiple muscles that are more about movement, running, fighting, fight or flight, as they talk about, etc. And so your brain starts truncating resources towards what would look like running away, fighting, etc. Okay. So all these other systems that are about replenishment, about enjoyment of life, if you will, aren't getting any resources sent to them. And so, like in my own experience, what I can speak to having CPTSD, I was in a dysregulated sympathetic dominant for decades. And I experienced chronic pain that led to fibromyalgia. I had IBS that led to food sensitivity. So if I even ate garlic, I would spend hours vomiting. My stomach would blimp up to many inches to where it looked like I was several months pregnant. I had migraines. I had brain fog. I had, gosh, what else? There's so many things. And it just depends on oh, and to get back to wearing the mask, no one knew any of that was happening. So I don't know that we can see anyone in class and really know and identify. In my mind, sometimes as a teacher, I do take note of the students who cannot relax, meaning they can't sit in the child's pose. They're needing to stay in their downward dog instead of taking that passive pose. They can't lay in shavasana. And I don't mean like a little bit of an itch, but like they legitimately cannot lay in shavasana for a few minutes. Like these are all cues to me that someone has a little bit more stress going through their body. There's a little bit more adrenaline, et cetera, cortisol. It's not so much that they're dysregulated. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not even qualified to say that, but I might look at the people who have this inability to sit still, that they might be slightly more sympathetic dominant. And so that's what I pick up on when I'm in a yoga classroom. And I have noticed that I used to teach yoga in a town that had a lot of military folks. And so and some of the students I know, they told me and disclosed that they had PTSD, but there are higher rates of PTSD in those communities. And I would notice that when I would touch them, and I don't think I actually put this in my book, it's an anecdotal thing that I've picked up, but with the students that I knew had PTSD, so very dysregulated, very much sympathetic tone, right? If you go to touch them, and it's not like a psychological response, it's literally a physiological one, they shudder. So they shake when you touch them, and it's not pain. It's almost like their body is in such a state of hyper arousal that calming effect causes them to like shake out into this relaxed form. And again, not forcing, not press. It's just your act of placing your hands on them when they feel safe can cause this shuddering, shaking effect. And to that point, hypertonicity which is basically your muscles staying in a clenched position, is super common with people with PTSD and having chronic pain, right? And so imagine you're doing a chest press on someone. So they're in supine bound angle, right? So reclined bound angle. And you go to give them the chest press. The muscles can be fully clenched in a hypertonic position, if you will, and the student doesn't know it. And then you come over and give them a chest press that's just, again, not taking them anywhere deeper, just giving them a little bit of a grounding sensation and adding a little bit to the pectoralis major stretch across the chest. They'll shudder because they're like, whoa, they're like letting go of the holding. And that tenseness across the chest is all of a sudden releasing into laxity. And it's, whoa, okay, this is letting go. And I didn't know I was there. Like, I didn't know I was holding so tightly. That's one way that like how I see it playing out. But I did it in my own body, but it's not necessarily what you feel from the inside out, but that's almost what it looks like when you're offering touch to someone who's had some hypertonicity.
That's really interesting. I want to go
Yeah.
back on a few things you spoke about. First of all, thank you so much for saying all that you've been through and that no one saw it. I think that is such a condition of our society, this hyper independent society. Like, I talk about it all the time because I think it's so important. We don't want to isolate. We want to connect. We want to go into that connection mode. And what you're doing is actually creating that connection, that bridge. And that's so important for so many people out there. So thank you. And I want to talk a little bit more about hypertonicity. How is it felt in the body?
I think the easiest way that it shows up as the experiencer. So let me give one caveat here. I am a massage therapist. I have worked in a clinical setting, like working with hypertonicity and various like musculoskeletal conditions at a chiropractic clinic. The art rubber band method is not massage. It is not. It is strictly for yoga teachers, and it is in no way a massage technique. But massage is all about body mechanics, and it's all about keeping your body safe and understanding how to read body tissues. And so that element does move into yoga and the rubber band method, biomechanics, how to read tissues. So that way you never offer pressure that is too much for someone's body. It's just right, if you will. And as the experiencer, hypertonicity is that little crick in your neck, like that muscle that just is chronically tight and you cannot get it to relax without truly giving it a break for a couple of weeks. That is hypertonicity, or that little kind of quote knot in your upper back. When you're a massage therapist on the other end of it, you can literally feel that the muscle is clenched. And but you in your own body, it doesn't necessarily feel that way. You can be oblivious to hypertonicity. It might have no pain at all, the muscle staying clenched, or you can be aware of it. Like, I know one of my kind of odd hypertonicity symptoms is I always squeeze my legs together. And so I experience fatigue all the time in my adductor or inner thigh muscles. And I do it especially when I drive. I don't know why. But so that's an example of hypertonicity. So I have extremely tight inner thigh muscles because they're just always like squeezing together all the time, but they aren't in pain. A lot of times you'll see the hypertonicity in someone's neck where they're constantly dealing with, oh, I've just got this knot in my neck, quote, knot in my neck. But again, that's from the experiencer. As a massage therapist, you can just straight up feel that it's tight, it's wound, it's bound, it's moving towards its center, and it has that like concentric contraction.
So your assisted touch can help draw sensory awareness to give more proprioception feeling, more embodied feeling for the participant to even acknowledge that it's turned on.
Which that becomes the key reason why I really want to see consensual informed touch show up in trauma spaces.
Mm.
Because one of the number one effects of PTSD or trauma, but usually PTSD, and they are different, is disassociation. So you literally feel like you are not inside of your body. Your body can feel numb. It can feel like it's just not there. I don't know how else to describe it. I was extremely disembodied, and it just feels like how my experience of it, everyone's is their own experience. But for me, it felt like I was floating outside of my body all the time. I remember I would get massages because I wasn't opposed to touch at all throughout my PTSD journey, but I used it very clinically until I started bringing it into yoga and seeing how it could work in other settings. But when I would get massage, I literally couldn't feel it. And I'd have to change massage therapists all the time because no one was doing it hard enough. And I would have to, like, I would literally, like a masochist, ask them to hurt me because I couldn't feel it. And so that's an example of disassociation. And that is in no way what I want to see come into trauma-informed spaces. But instead, we can offer touch that's consensual, that's fully informed and clear. And then people start to realize, oh, those are my erector, my spinal muscles. That's what they feel like. That is my back. And that might sound so rudimentary for someone who is fully embodied. But when you are disassociated, that is huge. It is huge to be able to actually feel different parts of your body and it to be done in a way that's like in the book, I talk about it in yoga. We have this practice that's called a nyasa. You can place your fingers on different parts of your body, and that's where you come to meditate. It acts a lot like that. So if you feel safe with someone and they're, say, putting their hands on, let's say, the reverse shoulder press. I have deer pose and a reverse shoulder press technique in the book, and they're essentially hitting back and forth between the shoulder blades on your back. Very safe space. If that feels comfortable for someone and they've consented to it, they can be like, oh, that is my upper back. I can feel my upper back. I can feel my back contacting their hands. Oh, that kind of that feels good. That feels interesting. That simple little practice starts to teach embodiment. And then for someone who's fully embodied and is just loving being inside of their body and can feel it great, they're just loving that extra sensation. It just feels fabulous. So it really helps people on either end of that spectrum.
Mhm. Thank you for describing what disassociation feels like. I wanted to talk about fascia, right? Because fascia is basically our proprioception. It's connected to the brain, it's the feedback loop of the body, but it is the largest sensory organ that has so many receptors in it. And so fascia and the nervous system are so intertwined and they're acting like a communication highway for safety and movement. So, how do you work with that relationship in your assists?
Yeah. So fascia is essentially what's delivering the collagen or the resistance to your muscles, right? And so when you go into a stretch and you feel that there's limitation, let's say you're doing, I mean, we mentioned Hanumanasana, the splits before. There's a lot of muscles involved with that, but let's just isolate on the hamstrings, the back of the thigh. You might reach this point where it gets really tight, or what I describe as TAUT, like it gets to that end point and you feel in your own body like I can't go any further. That's your fascia protecting you. And it's those collagen fibers going, this is the limit to the range of motion that we're going to allow in order to keep you safe. And yes, that is very much linked to your nervous system. And I think it's fascinating that people can be under anesthesia and their range of motion changes dramatically. So our nervous system does have a huge impact on our range of motion. Now, when it comes to hands on assists, really what we're feeling for is taking up the slack in the fascia and to do so without a lot of muscular contraction. So we're inviting in a little bit of ease. That means less effort for the student. And then we're taking up the slack in the fascia. That is not to, again, take them anywhere deeper. It's just so that way they can really feel all of those nerve endings. And so when we're taking up that slack, you can really feel like, oh, there's that stretch. So maybe not splits, Hanumanasana, let's say like reclined, extended hand to foot. So that hamstring stretch. You're like holding it with the strap, got the strap around the ball of your foot. You're drawing the foot towards your face with your leg extended to the sky. You can feel the hamstring stretch, right? But your shoulders are efforting, your core is efforting, your arms are efforting. You're trying to bring that leg towards you. Now the teacher comes in. This is a more advanced assist. It's not in this first book that I published, but in the later assists, you're feeling for that hamstring and that posterior line of fascia, and you're taking up the slack. The student can relax, they can let go of the strap and just lay there and be with their leg and feel what's going on and feel the connection. And it is that embodiment of understanding, oh, what's going on back there. But stretching also is very calming. Just the very simple act of stretching and having someone help assist that pose brings in that calming effect of the nervous system.
And then would you pair another exercise on top of it, like for vagal toning, for example? Would you use like a hum or a sigh, a deep breath? Like, how would you signal if someone's resisting that stretch or that touch? Would you signal for their own internal cue?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't. So I keep them separate in the sense that, say, I was going to offer someone that assist and they were resisting, I would say, this isn't the assist I should be giving them. Like
Mm.
this, because if their nervous system is instantly pushing back, they're not in a state of safety. And that's something and that's an assist that you shouldn't be providing to them. That would be my initial response. So I don't normally pair it with that. What's interesting is that what you're describing is using breath or using a vagal tone or whatever is creates the same effect that safe touch automatically causes. So, in a way, you don't need to build in these other tools because you just touching someone and it feeling good and consensual and serving the practice, that's a big one too. Because, say it's any one of these postures and you come in to offer the assist or an assist, and it makes no sense to them. They're not really sure what you're doing or why you're touching them. It's not going to feel good. It's just going to feel confusing. And they're going to clench and maybe possibly resist you a little bit, or they're going to go along for the ride and still end up confused. So if it really does serve the practice, it creates this bottom up regulation. They feel themselves calm. Again, they feel the release of the neurochemicals that are going to help them feel the reduction of cortisol, which is namely oxytocin. So in my experience, I don't try to change their state in the shape. I meet them where they're at and then take them to where their body wants to go without force.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is touch helps to release oxytocin. It helps to decrease inflammation. It helps to improve mood. It counteracts the loneliness. It helps you just to
Yes.
feel yourself in your body.
And I love that you said that. Thank you for summarizing because I can ramble a little bit. But to your point, we have all of these tools to accelerate our practice, right? We have mudra, we have bandha, we have drishti, we have mantra, we have, which for yogis who are out there, we have body locks, we have focal point for our eyes, we have humming, or we have using the throat or singing in some way. We have all these tools to try to really maximize our practice. Those are yogic tools. But then now we've got these scientific somatic tools that you can be building in to maximize the healing effects. But no one's using touch. And touch is so fundamental. And it's used in exactly the same way, in the sense that it just adds a little bit more from a biochemical standpoint to the practice, to the well being of the practitioner. And so, why aren't we using it? It's so easy. And I think a big reason why we're not using it is because it is the Wild West when it comes to touch. Teachers are almost always well intentioned and they don't want to hurt anyone, they don't want to hurt themselves. They're not sure how to do it. They're not sure about what they've been taught. And so they're just like, ah. And then there's some who are just very overly confident and do it anyways, and maybe create experiences for people who don't always feel that great. And so again, Wild West, my hope is by introducing this methodology that has been tried and true and used for nearly 15 years and modified over that time, that it's a system that does feel safe, does feel purposeful, and does feel like it is that next little enhancement, whether it is our focal point, our mantra, our meditation, et cetera, all these little ways to amplify the practice.
I love that you bring up the fear. It is one of the biggest blockades of anyone touching somebody else. I'm a massage therapist as well by trade. And yeah. And so it helped me have so much confidence in the classroom to be able to touch and to feel that elasticity in the person's body. And in your book, you speak about it so well. I love the rubber band metaphor. So brilliant, Kiara.
Yes, thank you.
So let's get rid of the fear. Let's talk about how someone can put their hands on someone and feel that elasticity, that rebound effect.
Because when you train quality of touch, which is what we're talking about, right? In the massage world, at least in America, we talk about it being quality of touch. So if you're doing deep tissue, this is in the massage realm, right? If you're getting a deep tissue or giving a deep tissue massage, it's got a certain quality of touch versus like effleurage or lomi. It's a completely different quality of touch, right? And so as practitioners, we learn, one, how to use our hands or other body parts, if we're looking at Thai massage, as tools, and then how much pressure and how to manipulate the tissue. And in so doing, we learn how to read the tissue as well. In the yoga space, from what I've seen over the years, there's no one teaching quality of touch, meaning as the practitioner who's providing it, are you learning how to read the tissues when you make contact with your student? If you can do, that's the number one not insurance, we can't insure anything, but that's the one safety barrier that we can create. When we can read tissues, when we're listening to the students' tissues, when we have learned tactile awareness, then we make sure that we're not taking students too far. We know how to listen to where that rebound is, where the tissues stop, where they say, no, no more here, and we're not forcing them further. There are a lot of traditional practices that do force the tissues, and it can be very injurious. And I am in no way saying let's force tissues. Let's instead listen to them, let them guide how much pressure is appropriate in whatever pose we're assisting, and let that be enough. For me, the reason why I love this is everybody is different, right? Every body that you touch is different from the next. It doesn't matter what sex they are, it doesn't matter what age they are. Like, people are anomalies. You cannot judge a book by its cover. I've touched people before and I'm like, whoa, you're way bendier than I thought you were, or vice versa. It's just everyone's different. And that's what makes it interesting. And that's what I think tunes me in too, is because I know this person's not going to be like the next. And so I really need to pay attention when I go to touch them.
That's so important to state, that we don't know, like you were saying before, behind the mask, right? Everybody is
Yeah.
so unique, everybody is different, everybody's coming into class with such different experiences. And I do believe that the one thing that I've seen come out of classrooms is that no one's touching anyone anymore out of fear of causing injury, because there are different methodologies that really push people past, and they've come out, and there's been a lot of articles written about it. So I think people are, again, that fear has come in. But in your book, you talk about assists, not really adjustments. And I love the distinction between the two. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the distinction between an adjustment and an assist.
Yes. Thank you. Because I was totally guilty of it. For ages, I called it adjustments. And then I have worked at a chiropractic clinic, and one of the chiropractors was like, I never understood why yoga teachers say adjustments. That's what we do. And I'm like, yeah. In fairness, what does the word mean? It means to fix, to correct. And so once I really started thinking about it, I thought, why am I saying adjustments? I'm not fixing anyone. I'm not, there is the place for fixing, right? But what I'm teaching largely is assists, and that is to support, to aid in the experience of the posture, not to change it in any way. And adjustment, we've dominated the jargon with that word for all touch being adjustments, and but not all touch is adjustments. And adjustments don't need to be done strictly with touch. Adjustments can be done verbally. They should be done with verbal, whether you're touching them, giving them props, whatever you're doing. Use your verbal cues, because that helps the learning. So that way the student knows how to adjust that pose the next time in their body. But yeah, so adjustments are using your words. Push your knee more towards your pinky toe if you're in your warrior two and that front knee is collapsing. If the words aren't getting there, because a lot of people don't necessarily have that toned, if you will, body awareness, toned proprioception, that ability to really know how to finely tune their body in space. If they haven't toned that yet, if they haven't practiced it, then you might need to give them a prop. You might need to demo in front of them a variation or modification of the pose. And last but not least, if it's for safety or clarity, you might need to touch them. And when I ask teachers to adjust with touch, I invite them to do it with the lightest guiding pressure they can to get the point across, with verbal cues. So for example, say it's warrior two and that front knee is caving in. I place my hand outside of the knee as a target and say, pressure knee towards me. And then once they've got it, once they're there, it's like, perfect. That's where you need to be for safety for that medial knee. But whatever it might be. So one that I'll see, let's take warrior two again, but say it's reverse warrior two, and the person is more turning it into the leg footprint looks like warrior two, but the upper body looks like warrior one. They're twisted, they're rotated, and they're going into this extension of the spine. That can be really compressive to the lumbar spine. It's not necessarily safe for all people. And so if I'm going to correct them, I might place my hands to the outsides of their shoulders, depending on what's available, right? And invite them to rotate gently, where it might say, pull your left shoulder back, press the right shoulder forward, whatever the verbal cue is, depending on what's happening in real time in front of me. But the touch is very light, and it's just directing them towards that safe alignment. Now, assists, on the other hand, it is a firmer touch. And that's where we're going in. We want to, what I call, hook into the tissue, meaning you're pressing hard enough to where you sink into their soft tissues, and then you can direct the tissue somewhere. For it to really serve the practice, we want to direct the tissues along the actions or lines of the pose. So, for example, I have an assist that I do in triangle pose. Okay, that's again a much more advanced one. Say they're in triangle pose. What's happening? That back foot is pressing down. So you're pushing down into the pinky edge of that back foot. Okay. You can mimic that by anchoring their outer hip, the lateral hip of that back leg. You can anchor it down. What is their spine doing? It's not in lateral flexion. Instead, it's nice and straight. It's extended, right? We are flexed at the hip, but we're not laterally bent. We're straight along the spine or parallel to the floor. And so if I'm anchoring that back hip, and then I can elongate the spine, and that pressure is going straight, it is not bending bring them down into lateral or rounded kind of flexion, if that's translating for listeners. Okay, so the idea is that with the assist, we're using slightly firmer pressure to direct the tissue somewhere, and where that is depends on the pose. And each pose has actions, whether the foot is pressing down, whether the heart is lifting up. We all know alignment cues. There's actions in every pose to create them. We're just mimicking them and we're slightly enhancing them. Sometimes it creates more stretch. Sometimes it creates more ease. Sometimes it just creates more grounding. So, for example, I have the arch palpation for Shavasana, and I even have neck traction for Shavasana. That's in my book. It's like, how is that enhancing the pose in any way? Let's be honest, how many people go into Shavasana and they're like, tonight for dinner, I'm going to make stroganoff and I need to go to the store and get sour cream, whatever. Okay. All of a sudden, someone's tractioning your neck, they're palpating your feet, right? And you're like, woo, I am in this Shavasana. Hello, Shavasana. Like you're there. And so it's amplifying that sense of groundedness, that sense of presence, of being there. And it's not a massage. Neither of those are massage techniques at all. And I make that distinction in the book. But yeah, so that's the difference between the two. One is to correct adjustment, light pressure uses verbal cues always. Assist, firmer pressure, enhances the pose, does not use verbal cues unless it's one of the more advanced assist techniques that I do where you need to work with the student because it is quite a bit more advanced.
Okay, so the adjustments are teaching proprioception by giving verbal cues by the hand outside of the lateral thigh to help press into it. So you're helping a body become informed. And then in the assist, you're deepening proprioception. The person is embodied in that way, and you're helping to light up the fascia to help proprioception grow even further to get deeper into their body.
Yes, you nailed it. And to the latter point of it, the reason why so let's just say someone already has proprioceptive awareness, right? They're safely aligned in their pose, they look comfortable, and we're offering the assist. How does that really offer more proprioception? Here's the thing. So many of us live busy lives, and just like Shavasana, where you're thinking about what you need to go to the store for dinner and everything else, we are spinning and we're constantly living in our heads. And how frequently, if we're completely honest, for most women, most people, do we stop and just check in and go, hey body, how you doing? Hey knees, how you feeling today? Whatever. And so when we come over and we give an assist, even in a yoga posture, because even in a yoga posture, we can be totally checked out. It happens all the time. But then a teacher offers an assist, you really feel your body because the assist is amplifying those kinesthetic or body cues in that pose. And so that moment of deep connection with your body, feeling those kinesthetic cues are what's helping to tone, or it's tone is not, that's, I was just playing with that word here. That's not necessarily how we would use it. You're basically building more neural pathways between that part of your body and your brain. But by creating that little signal, you are building better body awareness between those 2 points, whether it's your feet, your hands, your shoulders, etc.
Yes. You said, how often are we in yoga poses, creating our checklists and figuring things out and not in our bodies? And I give this example quite a bit. How many times do you walk around your block? And every time you walk around your block, you notice something new, right? So I love that when you're giving these deeper assists, that's what you're helping people do as well. You're helping people come down into the parasympathetic tone. They can ground in their body and have that neurofeedback loop of gaining more and more proprioceptive tools, but also creating safety. The more we feel ourselves in time and space, the more we feel safe with ourselves. And I think that is absolutely incredible. I have a question. How do you prepare your nervous system before offering someone touch?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And you had said earlier that a lot of yoga teachers, a barrier for them is like fear of harm or whatever. I think another one is on an energetic realm. I've had so many teachers bring this up to me, is like they're concerned about the energetic exchange. And so I bring that up to answer this question in that for me, it's not about touching another person's body. I just need to have my nervous system regulated before I do just about anything. If I'm going in to teach a yoga class, I need to be regulated. If something crazy happened in my day, I can't go in dysregulated and I don't know, have a meltdown in front of the class. I need to regulate myself before I teach, before I do my job. If I'm going to do a massage, touching aside, I need to be present, grounded, regulated, ready to be there. So I guess to answer that question is I think the answer for me, and I encourage other teachers, is to do the work on yourself on a day to day, regardless of what you're doing. You know what I mean? If you're going in to go grocery shopping, try to do it grounded or try to do it present in this regulated state. And if you're feeling dysregulated, then do whatever practices work for you to help you come back into your body so you can be present for it. So to me, touch is no different. But on that, I do believe in the energetics and the exchange of things and our energetic bodies interacting with other bodies. I am trained in heart math, and it's wonderful that you can have someone whose heart is in coherence and you can literally be in the same room as someone who's incoherent in their heart, in their nervous system. You can see it in their heartbeats, and your coherence, just by being in their presence, will cause their heart to become coherent. Our energy fields do have an impact. And so when I first started offering assists way back in the day, I would I would wear bracelets or a watch, because I always had a watch on one hand to check my time instead of using a phone, and then I'd have mala or bracelet or something on the other hand or other wrist. And I set the intention that no one's energy could pass past these my wrist points, my bracelets or whatever. My hands could bring in universal energy and they could release universal energy, but I wasn't taking anything on. And I always made a point to wash my hands after class, not just for hygiene, but the idea of any energy that I've interacted with, I'm just rinsing it off. I'm letting it go. And yeah, I guess to answer the question, I think that regulating your nervous system is a daily practice that we need to do regardless of what we're doing. And if we are feeling dysregulated, don't offer assists that night. I've been offering assists in my classes forever, and as long as I've been teaching. And I've had days where I was like, there's just enough for me to come in and teach today. I don't have any more to give. And I'll
Mm.
say to students like, hey guys, tonight I'm not going to be offering hands-on assists. I'm sorry. I'll probably be back to doing it next week, but just know I'm not going to be offering that up this evening. Like, we have autonomy just as much as our students do. And so if we're not feeling up for it, if we're feeling dysregulated, we're not down for it, don't feel like you're obligated. Like, I've had teachers who felt so obligated to give assist to every single student that they burned themselves out. And I tell them, you need to work on your boundaries, because you don't owe an assist to anyone, nor should you be giving the same assist to every single student, because the body, you only want to give it to students who are safely aligned, appear comfortable, and are holding the quintessential look of the pose. So for example, if someone's more in a puppy pose than a child's pose, we're not going to push their hips into a child's pose. We wouldn't give them a hip press or sacral press or really any child's pose assist in that kind of puppy variation. And so working on those boundaries to where I'm either not going to give assist today, and I will communicate it so they're not confused about what's going on if this is something I normally do, but I'm also not going to burn myself into the ground to try to give one assist to every single person in class. It's just not possible, especially if you're teaching to huge classrooms.
I absolutely love the permission of saying out loud, hey, this is my boundary tonight. That's so important for nervous system training as well. Like, I think it's so important to honor where you're at. So thank you for saying it out loud so other teachers can give themselves the permission to not do it if they feel that they don't have the capacity for it that evening.
When we as teachers get really good at cultivating agency in our yoga classrooms by allowing students to modify in the way that they need to, by asking for clear consent if we're going to touch them long before we go in to offer contact, right? Then we start really cultivating agency as a whole, as a practice in our life, even when it comes to us, not just for our students, but for us. And we know when there are days where it's like, no, maybe not today. I'm going to hold that line. And yes, it is boundaries, but it's also realizing, oh, I have agency too. And I'm going to practice that agency because my intuition's telling me this isn't appropriate for me.
Thank you for saying that. It's consent for yourself and it's consent for the other person. So making sure that you have your list of boundaries of what you're unwilling to do and what you're willing to do, and making sure that also is in value with how you want to be in the classroom. When I read the book and what I'm hearing today, I just really feel like between the HRV, the vagal tone, the hypertonicity, the PTSD, the assist versus adjustments, the how to get into the body, the proprioception, it seems like the rubber band method is really like a form of nervous system retraining. This is how to get into someone's body. Do you see it that way?
100%. and I talk about it in my book a little bit, but for me, yoga's always been a healing space. It has never, ever been a workout space. It still is not a workout space for me. It is a space for me it's a moving meditation. It's a place for me to come home to myself. And when I was in the thick of my journey, my healing journey with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, yoga was like my sanctuary. It was the place that it was the only time in the 24 hours of the day that I actually just felt okay, like just good enough. And it was actually touch that I received in a yoga class that was miraculous for me. I had such extraordinary healing through contact, but also through like body re-embodiment, etc., that it became this space that I really honor as a healing space for the practitioner, for the individual. And one experience that I had with a yoga teacher, I go into the book, so I won't talk about it too much, but essentially my PTSD had gotten so severe that I was breathing backwards. So whenever I inhaled, my airway would actually close. And when I exhaled, it would open, and it should do the opposite. When you inhale, you should be inviting the air in. So every time I breathed, I thought I was suffocating. And I literally was living in a state of panic 24/7. And the ear, nose, throat doctor did the scope down my throat and saw what was happening. Oh, you're just breathing backwards, and dismissed me. And I got no help. And this is 20 years ago about, and I didn't know where else to go but yoga, because yoga was the only thing that was talking about breathing at the time. And so I was learning to breathe in the class, trying to breathe. And I'm sure I was the student who had the loudest ujjayi in the room. I don't know what I was doing. I was just trying to breathe. And at the same time, suffocating is what it felt like. And the yoga teacher would always, her name's Lori. I wish I could find her just to tell her, but she'd always turn off the lights in Shavasana and do a really long Shavasana. And she came over that evening and placed her fingers on my sternum. And I honestly don't know how long she sat there with me, but she just kept saying, breathe into my fingers, whispering it to me. And I couldn't. And then finally I did actually breathed in for the first time. My airway opened and I could take an actual deep breath. And that breath instantly caused me to sob. I started crying. And I started crying so hard, I don't know, stepped out of my body a little bit. She closed the class, everyone left. She just left the lights off and waited at the front of the studio. And I cried for about 30, 35 minutes. I came out feeling like a completely fresh person. And she even said, I think somatic body work might be good for you. And that's where I started my journey down exploring these different techniques that would help me heal my nervous system from complex post traumatic stress disorder. And mine was extremely severe. And so yoga had always been this space where I could come and heal. But yoga also was limited to a degree. Like it wasn't quite getting there. And when I became a yoga teacher, which so many of us do to try to give back the gift that was a gift to us, I started to realize I felt drawn to offer something that would really help anyone heal in the classroom. Because as I started teaching for so many years, I started hearing stories from students that were, sorry, that were awful, that were dealing with like really tough things. And so they were coming to yoga to try to reconnect with themselves. And I realized like this is a space where people do come to regulate their nervous system. And we have all of these extraordinary practices to help us do it. Who knew 20 years ago that singing mantra or chanting Om actually is stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve at the back of the throat. You are vagal toning. There are so many different things that we do from the breath practices, et cetera, that are creating this autonomic nervous system regulation. And yet we're not including touch. And touch from that moment with that yoga teacher to massage therapist to somatic body work to a Hakomi therapist who just held me and let me cry. Touch has been such a powerful way for me from a primal standpoint to heal, because in my experience, my dysregulation was based on developmental trauma. And so my nervous system is set apart from my brain. My brain is, we're cool, we got this, we're fine. We've moved on from this experience. My body's, yeah, no. And so how do you deal with that? You can't address it from the top down. You can't address it from the mind. You can't change your mind about something and then the body just understand. You've got to work with the body up. And yes, this is a nervous system regulation, but it's because in my personal journey, I saw how basic and fundamental contact is. And as someone who does not necessarily welcome it unless it's consensual and unless it's purposeful, I'm someone who's cautious, who's let's use it cautiously because it's benign in the sense that it's not necessarily going to cause harmful side effects. But if it doesn't feel consensual, it can cause harmful side effects. And touch very much can be harmful when it's used as a weapon. But when it's used not clinically, but as a way to just create safety, like in a yoga class, it does remarkable things for everyone. Everyone. You don't need to have PTSD. Not need. You don't need to be the person who has PTSD to benefit from it. You could be the person who just has 1,000 errands every day and is full throttle on your sympathetic nervous system and just don't know how to relax. You can offer them an assist, and all of a sudden they just feel everything start to calm and they start to sleep better, et cetera. And it's interesting because in that meta-analysis I referenced earlier, they pointed out getting an hour massage duration isn't actually what benefits us, it's frequency. And so imagine if someone's coming in and they go to yoga every single day and their teachers are offering assists in all of those classes and someone's getting contact every single day, perceived loneliness drops, inflammation drops, cortisol drops, anxiety drops, depression drops. All of these things start dropping. We can see well-being go up just as a result. So yes, it is, but that's the long story to say it felt like my mission to share with others what I thought was so fundamentally, powerfully healing in multiple settings, but such an easy thing to access at a very cost-effective rate in a yoga class, because not everyone can afford a massage regularly or once a month or whatever it may be. But if you're going to your yoga class and your teachers are offering hands-on assists, you can get touch that feels great and that is consensual frequently.
First of all, your story and all that you shared brought shivers into my body. So thank you so much for sharing and for letting yourself get emotional. I also do agree, like the more proficient you become in something, the more you go into the rabbit hole of discovering, you really see the pros and cons and you become more wary. Like you do it because you know it's good, but you ask the how, the why, you ask those questions and you start to say, okay, we do this, but it depends. And I appreciate that so much in teachers.
I'm not a clinician. I'm not a researcher. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a massage therapist, but I'm also someone who has lived with and survived extremely difficult decades of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is on the furthest end of the stress continuum, right? Because stress falls on a continuum from sometimes to chronic to acute to PTSD to CPTSD. And what that meta-analysis, again, what it said is that touch is particularly beneficial for people who have mental health disorders, clinical disorders. The truth in that, from my lived experience, is that the benefits were like tenfold. I could feel them so pronounced versus take someone who's maybe regulated. It's giving them benefits, but because the well that they're trying to fill is not so empty, it's not as pronounced. And then take someone who is so wildly disembodied to all of a sudden bringing them to embodiment, like it's mind blowing. It feels like a miracle, right? And so my lived experience has been to be the guinea pig that's, especially all of this stuff, science wasn't. It's not to say science wasn't backing it then, but it wasn't at the fore. I was going through all of this when social media was just starting, Facebook was just being released, when you could go and research stuff, but not necessarily at PubMed. It wasn't easy to access it. So all I could run off of was like, okay, I am a vast desert of well-being. I am so not right now. And then using my own experience to learn and to see how profoundly helpful things can be. But then once getting to that healed point, or at least healed enough point, because it's a journey, then offering it to students and letting them give me the feedback and to witness their experience. It's extraordinary that I've been gifted to teach incarcerated youth with PTSD and to see how touch can bring the walls down, to work with women who have told me that they've experienced sexual assault and how it helps them to just feel like they can be back in their body again. These are extreme examples. Again, this is something that can be used with everyone, but if it's having that effect on people that are at that extreme, then it The proof is in the pudding.
Thank you for saying that. The lived experience, that proficiency, that knowledge with using yourself as a guinea pig, for letting yourself go there and go into that yoga classroom and say, I'm willing to try because I need to feel, I need to connect. And that makes an incredible teacher because you're offering your own experience, your lived experience. And when people come to you, it's that shared experience that you're connecting from. I think that is so admirable and so incredible. And your students, I'm sure they're so grateful to have you. And now with this book reaching internationally, I'm so excited for people to get this book. I want to talk about something personal a little bit. Speaking about lived experience, my podcast, it's a lot about nervous system and health and women. And so my personal experience is being diagnosed with menopause at the age of 32 and having to live with that and going through this whole journey to bring back my cycle. And you opened up to me about how trauma shifted your hormonal landscape and how it led you into perimenopause and how HRT is become now an essential part of creating steadiness for you. So for listeners who are navigating this kind of whirlwind in their body, can you explain how it gave you that sense of agency?
Yeah, to answer that question, in about 2018, so about 7 years ago, I would have been, I don't know, 36. I just felt like I started going through what I called the quarter life crisis. Everything just started to dismantle and come apart. And I had pointed to developmental trauma as part of my story. And so I've been dealing with PTSD and a dysregulated nervous system for essentially my whole life. And I've done the psychological work. Like I've worked through all of it, the forgiveness, the acceptance, the various psychological top down element. But when all of these things started to dismantle in my life about 7 years ago, meaning I just started to crumble and fall apart as far as my resilience and my window of capacity started getting weaker, I just thought this was aging. And in a way, I started to lose my willpower around complex post traumatic stress disorder in the sense that I thought, I'm never going to be able to heal from this. These are the cards I'm dealt. Like, I'm just going to have a destroyed nervous system. It's a terrible thing to say, but I sometimes just felt so helpless because it just felt like it was never ending. Like, how many things can I throw at this? And why is it not getting any better? And I'd have great days and I'd have not great days, etc. Fast forward, and I also have ADHD. There's a lot of things in this mix, CPTSD and ADHD. Both of those symptoms just started going through the roof, like really bad. The anxiety, sometimes the panic, the IBS, the fibromyalgia started increasing. Like everything started firing back up. And I'm like, what's going on? I need to reduce my stress. I didn't know what was going on. Anyways, fast forward with the publishing of the book, actually, there was heightened stress with that. And I had a complete meltdown and talked to a girlfriend, and she goes, Key, I don't think this is like your resilience or your PTSD or ADHD. I think this is your hormones. And I'm like, really? And I've always been of a mind that I don't care what it is. I will try it if it seems natural. And to me, like doing hormone replacement therapy is natural. It's more natural than the birth control I'd been taking for most of my life. And so I was open to it. And I got on HRT, full HRT. And what blew my mind is that every symptom that I thought was complex post-traumatic stress disorder or ADHD rearing its head went away, went away. I feel
Wow.
peace. I feel calm. I focus. I was astonished at like the damage it was, even not the damage because my husband and I have a beautiful relationship, but like just the complications it was creating in the relationship because I was on edge all the time. And I don't know, I wasn't like fully myself. And so, in all honesty, what HRT gave me was me. It gave me back. I literally thought that I just had this dysregulated nervous system that could never be repaired. I thought it must have been. I'd done all this work. I was doing so good. And now all of a sudden it's falling apart. No, it was perimenopause. And what's interesting to me is that they're starting to do research now. I know there's one, I think, out of Australia where they studied children who had experienced severe sexual abuse. They go into menopause 10 or 12 years early. I think the Menopause Society in America did a study on women vets with PTSD or at least likely PTSD, and they go in like twice as early. And so there is evidence that's starting to come out that if you've experienced trauma and if you're someone who's had severe trauma like I have, there is this strong likelihood that you're going to go into perimenopause way earlier than you thought. In my family, it's this mid 40 number. So in my head, I just kept thinking, oh, it'll be in my mid 40s when I'm going to start experiencing stuff. No one taught me what a hot flash was. I've been having them for years, didn't even know. So there's just this mass of confusion, misinformation, and not understanding the implications that it wasn't my nervous system wasn't healed and that it was falling apart. It was that, oh, my hormones are depleted and I'm actually in perimenopause and that's taxing my nervous system like a trauma. That's what it was like for my body because of its history. I finally feel human. I told my husband the other night, I was so tired after a long day of work. I said, pre HRT, this kitchen that needs to be cleaned up would cause a meltdown and I would cry because I simply don't have it in me to do it. And I'm like, right now, I'm exhausted, but I'm going to clean this kitchen. Like, I can do it. I feel capable. And there's no crying, there's no meltdown.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so important for women to know how much cortisol impacts our hormones, the underlying root problem that cortisol is creating in the body. So it's so important. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so interesting that in your life, they say you have to travel the world just to come back home. And your mom at home was a massage therapist and taught touch. It taught you how touch felt in your body, how it created that oxytocin, how it released that inflammation, how it helped to connect to yourself. And then you went through all these things in your life and you came back, and touch was the thing that connected you to yourself.
I know. Sometimes I think it must be my dharma because I certainly, and what's interesting is that I never became touch averse, even with PTSD, because I always just viewed touch as clinical. I did see it at that one end, that it was intimate or clinical. I see it in other people, and that's also how I viewed it, meaning that perception of it being at those two ends, and there's really just not this centerpiece. But I learned through the healing capacity of that centerpiece, that center point, that it can be something that's not fully clinical. It is not intimate. It's right there in that sweet spot where it can be received regularly and really can have a positive impact. And to this day, I'm not touch averse, but I'm touch appropriate, if you will. Like, I'm not a fan if someone touches me without permission. I hold very strong boundaries and agency over my body. So I want to be asked, and I want to be asked respectfully. I want to be asked in a way where it's okay if I say no. Because in all honesty, if we really have agency over our bodies, we should also be particular about who's touching our body. Do you know what you're doing? Are you going to be safe with my body? I've had some assists or adjustments, I guess back in the day, we would have called them adjustments, that were truly scary and injurious. Like, I have a lasting shoulder injury that eventually led to a separation. And I'm still of a mind that it's like, we need to be choosy. We need to be informed. We need to make sure that we're doing this in a way that really honors the anatomy of the body, the biomechanics of the teacher, the person, the practitioner that's providing it, and doing it in a way that feels energetically, internally, subjectively safe, meaning we've consented to it and we've been asked in a way that really feels like we have the right to say no and we won't be punished for saying no.
That is so important. Also, I never heard you have to get touched all the time to experience the benefits of it. And that's a really interesting key takeaway. It's not about that hour massage. It is making sure that you're being touched in a consensual way as many times as you need it to bring that nervous system to parasympathetic.
Because if you think about it at the most primal, like primate level, being touched frequently lets you know that you're part of a tribe, that you're connected. Simply put, your organism is like, we're connected. Versus if you're only getting that 1 hour massage, very seldomly, and not much connection beyond that, just regular, just connection, a hug or an assist or whatever it might be. Like, those are the little messages that tell your system, we're okay. We're in this tribe. We're in this together. We're good. And we're biologically built to be in a tribe, not to be solo.
Wow. Thank you so much for just connecting the dots more and more. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I'm so excited for my listeners to hear it. There's so much information, there's so much goodness, and so many good key takeaways. So I'm really excited for everyone to listen. Thank you so much, Kiara.
You're so welcome. I had such a good time. Thanks for having me.
If you love this episode and want to go deeper, Kiara's book, Hands-On Yoga Assists, is truly a must-have for any yoga teacher or student who wants to bring safer, smarter, more embodied touch back into the classroom. You can grab your copy through the link in the show notes. It'll take you right to Amazon. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.